Let's get to NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster. He is live now in Minneapolis. Shaq, what is the reaction there to Amy Klobuchar's announcement, both that the charges against Derek Chauvin will go from third-degree murder to second, and that we do expect the other 3 officers to be arrested and charged?
You heard applause, you heard cheers, you heard chants saying we got all 4. People were, they really appreciated the charges that just came in. And you said, and you mentioned Amy Klobuchar, and that we heard the announcement first from her on her Twitter feed, but I just got into my email. We're looking at the charges. Officer Chauvin, the officer who had his knee on the neck of George Floyd for about 9 minutes, his charges have been upgraded to 2nd-degree murder, and that's according to the Minnesota court system right now. So that is official on Officer Chauvin and the escalation of those charges. Initially, it was a 3rd-degree murder charge that he had initially. But let me just show you around a little bit. You see people from all walks of life. They were here commemorating, as we've been seeing all week long, people bringing flowers, people handing out water, people wearing masks and handing out masks to folks. You see that community feeling right now, and what you saw were people looked down at their phones and someone read out the charge out loud, saying that all 4 officers have been charged, which has been the main call of these protesters. It's been exactly what they've been calling for over a week now. And now that all officers have been charged, you heard that celebration. There was a very solemn moment as people started singing all in unison. It was a moment that really, you could tell people really came together, and there was an appreciation that they finally got what they were looking for, and that's for all 4 officers involved in the death of George Floyd, for them to be arrested and charged.
Shaq, do we have any sense of the timing here, when those officers might actually be arrested? Any updates on the timeline? I know this is all so fresh, and we're just getting this news trickling in right now.
No update on the timing of that yet. We will expect to hear from Keith Ellison, who's the Attorney General. He actually took control of the prosecution of this case. This is a case that initially was being prosecuted by the county prosecutor, but then the state came in, Keith Ellison came in. He said in the past week that he would expect to see these charges, these officers to be charged. And you're seeing, it seems like that's starting to happen, and those wheels are starting to turn. Allison?
Shaq, this has been quite a day in Minneapolis. You were there earlier today when the Floyd family showed up. They went to visit the site where George Floyd died. Yeah. Could you tell us about that incredibly emotional visit and what his family had to say?
Yeah, you saw, it's the scene right here that you saw the son of George Floyd come up. He walked over, he got on one knee, and then he had a prayer. It was a very solemn moment, a very sacred moment, and that's what you continue to see the family come here. And that's when you heard Benjamin Crump call for the arrest of the 4 officers, and that's what you keep seeing here at this site.
Shaq, have we gotten reaction from the family yet today to the news, the upgraded charges?
Yes, we did, and I'm going to pull it right on my phone. Benjamin Crump, the family attorney, actually responded, and he had a statement. He said, he said, this is bittersweet. This is a bittersweet moment. We are deeply gratified that Attorney General Ellison took decisive action, arresting and charging all the officers involved in George Floyd's death and upgrading the charge against Derek Chauvin to a felony 2nd-degree murder. Hashtag justice for George. Again, when Benjamin Crump, when he came here with the son of George Floyd, he said, and they were calling for these charges, he said that would come before the memorial service. We know there's a memorial service tomorrow here in Minneapolis, and then in North Carolina this weekend, another service before Mr. Floyd is laid to rest in Houston on Saturday. So this is exactly what they've been calling for, not only the attorney, not only the family, but leaders here in Minneapolis and across the state and across the country, frankly, calling for the rest of all of the officers involved. Yeah. Allison?
Shaq, this has been quite a day already in Minneapolis. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Allison.
More protests planned in New York City today, and there is hope that they will remain peaceful tonight. It looks like new police measures to contain late-night violence worked last night. About 200 people were still arrested overnight, but there were fewer reports of looting and vandalism compared to the night before. Let's go to NBC News investigations correspondent Tom Winter for the latest on the NYPD's response. And Tom, the protests last night did look like they were relatively calm compared to what we were seeing on Monday night. What are police saying? What are they attributing that to?
Well, you're absolutely right. And so last night, the protests were, in fact, quite calm. As a matter of fact, there were a number of protests, organized protests, that went on well past the curfew time of 8 p.m. And police let them go on because they said they're peaceful protests. People are speaking out about the events that we've seen over the past week or so in Minneapolis. And, of course, the event that led up to all of this, which is the death of George Floyd and what's going on where we just saw Shaq. So I think when you look at the totality of it, you're looking at one of these peaceful protests kind of breaking up now. Police felt like last night was a much better night. Now, on to the looting and the vandalism and some of the violence that we've seen over the past few nights that's led to this absolute peak of chaos on Monday night in the city where over 700 people are arrested. We're down about 60% from that in arrests for last night to about 280 or so. And so that's a big difference. So it's not these protests that you're looking at on screen that police have had issues with or concerns with now for days. Those have gone off without a hitch, and they want people to be able to protest, they say. What they say that they're still dealing with are groups of people that are here to conduct criminal acts. We got some more information on that today from Police Commissioner Derek Chauvin. Chauvin detailing the types of folks that have been coming into the city. He says people from Brooklyn, from the Bronx have been coming into Manhattan to conduct this looting that they've seen citywide, and some of the vandalism that, as I said, reached a peak on Monday night. So that's been an issue. On top of that, they've had anarchists and other kind of disparate groups that have been involved with some of the police violence. They said that law enforcement officers found bins of rocks yesterday at different points throughout the city that could be used against police. They've talked about this. We've talked about this before as far as the ability to resupply and set up routes for people to get more things to kind of engage with officers with and conduct violence. So that's been a concern. The other thing that worked last night are you just saw those vehicles coming down the street in New York City. By curtailing the traffic and by putting this curfew in early, police were able to stop vehicles. One of our colleagues was out with police. A number of vehicles stopped that had guns in them, had looted goods in them. So it was a pretty successful night as far as the tactics that were employed. We'll see what happens tonight.
Tom, early on, the governor criticized the NYPD's handling of these protests. Has the NYPD reacted or responded to that?
Well, they sure did respond. A number of officers took issue with the governor's comments, and basically the NYPD brass said, look, if you're going to blame somebody, blame us or engage with us, the leadership. Don't engage with the police officers. It's something that the top uniformed officer of the NYPD, the chief of department, Terrence Monahan, spoke about earlier today on the Today Show.
You'd have to come out and see what these men and women are doing. Don't ever call them ineffective. As a matter of fact, last night his office called and apologized to me. I know he called the commissioner directly to apologize that that's not what he meant. The men and women of this agency have done a remarkable job in probably unprecedented times, and I couldn't be prouder of the work the men and women of this agency have done.
Allison, the police in New York City are now working 12-hour tours. There's several thousand additional officers that have been detailed. Requested days off have all been canceled. The schedule says that they can be called in at any time and be assigned to any command if they need it. So I think Chief Monahan's point here is, look, don't pick on the cops that are actually doing the work. He said that they're tired, that they're bloodied. This has been physical and taxing work. This is not police sitting in cars waiting for people to commit crimes. These are police going out and chasing people that are trying to damage New York City. So it's been a challenge the last few nights, and police say that they're going to be out there for the next few nights to come.
Hey, and look, Tom, you said it. It's true. It has been a challenge for them for the past few months as well. It tends to be a little bit more back of mind with what's going on in our country right now. But we are still in the midst of the pandemic, and we have talked to you time and time again about what a toll that has taken on the NYPD.
Yeah, almost 6,000 members of the department have had coronavirus, according to the latest departmental statistics. At one point, nearly 1 in 5 police officers were out sick, and that percentage is now down to about 2.5%, which is the normal amount. It's gone up a little bit over the past few days, obviously, as police have suffered injuries, been run over by vehicles, been hit by rocks. One of our colleagues spoke to somebody who was hit by a lieutenant that was hit by a brick on Sunday evening in a pretty disturbing video. So, yeah, it's been a tough couple of months for them, from illness to these protests, but they say that they want people out there peacefully protesting if that's what they'd like to do. Yep. And they've spoken out, including the head of the union of the New York City Police Department, as you and I discussed yesterday, about what happened in Minneapolis.
Yeah, Tom, look, we all know the goal here is for New Yorkers to be able to express their voices, to have their feelings heard, and to be safe while doing it. I hope it stays that way tonight. Tom Winter, thank you so much.
Me too. Thank you.
Protesters back in the streets of Washington, D.C. for a 6th day today, hundreds of them outside the U.S. Capitol. At one point, Capitol Police took a knee in solidarity with those protesters. NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber joining me now from D.C. And Ellison, what is it like where you are right now?
Hey, Allison, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi just came outside to thank some of the protesters here and walk around. She had a bit of a mixed reaction. Some people thanking her for being here, others feeling like it was a bit of a photo op. You can see there is still a fairly large crowd here. It's substantially smaller than what it was earlier. People are sort of just hanging out kind of as the day has finished. The group who's organizing this, they have a march, another march that they will be doing on Saturday. They say they're talking, kind of planning for some of that right now. But look, again, protesters were out here today for hours. They started down at Freedom Plaza around 9:30 this morning, and in the heat, they marched their way right here. They held their hands up, painted the palms of their hands red, and pointed it towards the building, saying that they believed the government and law enforcement have blood on their hands. They chanted, they sang songs. At one point, they were kneeling at various points and asking the officers on the other side of this bike rack barricade to kneel with them. Some did, most did not. Protesters who were in this area, all of them at one point got on the ground and laid with their face down for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. They had their heads, their bodies on the ground, completely silent, symbolizing a moment of silence for the amount of time that officer kept his knee crushed on George Floyd's neck as he died laying on the ground there. The first sound I heard when they were all lying here was a bit of a muffled sound from one of the protesters crying. We spoke to her after, and here's what she told us she was experiencing in that moment.
This is just a start. We really appreciate all of the law enforcement that goes in with that, but this is only a start. We're looking to defund our local law enforcement offices, especially NPD. There's a budget hearing here soon, so we just hope that budget cuts are being made. And we also call for the abolishment of transit police as well.
That was the wrong soundbite there. That was actually one of the organizers of this event talking about something else. But the protester that I spoke about, who I heard crying, I asked her, what she was feeling laying there in that moment. And she said she just became overwhelmed with emotion because in that moment, she really felt and realized how long 8 minutes and 46 seconds is. She said her message to people at home is if you care about this, she hopes that they will do something. But it was a very emotional day, very powerful day here at the Capitol as hundreds of peaceful protesters made their voices heard. And it seems like people inside that building, some are at least hearing, because again, we've seen 2 public officials come out, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, as well as Senator Elizabeth Warren. Allison?
Good to see. Ellison, the mayor of D.C. is extending the citywide curfew another day, but moving it back to 11 p.m. tonight after it sounds like last night's protests were relatively calm. What is the mayor of D.C. saying worked here, and what are the plans to try to keep that going through tonight?
Yeah, I mean, compared to what we saw 2 nights ago, there were very minimal arrests, a lot less confrontations between protesters and police. The curfew last night was 7 p.m. As far as we could tell, for the most part, officers weren't really enforcing that. When someone asked the mayor about it today, she said, we were never cracking down on peaceful protests, though some of the protesters would disagree with that. In terms of the police response, one thing that you will notice if you walk around in any of those areas where we've seen protesters congregate, particularly near the White House at Lafayette Square, is a heavy police presence. And it's not just D.C. police. You will see uniforms that really just run the gamut. We have seen ATF, DEA, military police, park police, some in uniform riot gear with kind of their badges and some of their signias marked and covered up. In terms of what D.C. and the mayor say they have asked for, they say that they have requested only some help from the D.C. National Guard, less than 100 guardsmen to help guard and set up a perimeter around Lafayette Park. And then they say they also had asked for help from their federal partners, FBI officers, as well as DEA officers. But again, as I said, we've seen many, many different police forces out here, federal law enforcement. We expect to see more of that tonight. But if last night was any indication, hopefully there will be not the same confrontations we saw when President Trump made that walk from the White House to St. John's Church. Allison.
Ellison Barber in D.C., where we certainly do hope things remain calm tonight. Thanks so much.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.